Winter has barely started, and I'm already dreaming of spring. I'm that guy. I'm absolute that guy. I'm like, And you know what I dream of? You know what my favorite thing to do in spring? I hope my back holds out so that I can actually do this again. Is I love getting ahead of the ice. Like we live in this keyhole cul-de-sac, and so the water accumulates badly. I love getting out there on my driveway, and even the middle. I've actually taken my spade other years, and I've done like a 75-foot channel to the end. Like I'm just chiseling through the ice, and there's something incredible about breaking loose and just letting the water flow. And it's like I'm being part of bringing spring back to the world, at least in our little corner of the world. So I just get great joy. And then when the water finally breaks through, the dam breaks. Isn't that a good feeling? Just things when break through. This is kind of what we're doing here in this series, this workshop series called The Culture of Heaven. What we're trying to do is trying to get our heads around how is God's culture, the culture of his kingdom, different than our culture? And so how can we get rid of the logjam of our own thinking, our own culture, which we've all been raised in? So nobody can say, that's not how I think, that's not how I value. Actually, we are products of the cultures in which we find ourselves. But very often, our culture, this Calgarian culture or Canadian culture, has some beautiful aspects to it, but there are parts of it that are diametrically opposed to the way God's kingdom works. So we've been unpacking this diagram. Some of the words change over the weeks as I get greater clarity on how to express it. But you can see that we've got these mindset shifts. Like we've got to move from a protection mindset to a connection mindset, from greed to generosity. We've talked about compliance, just fitting into a kind of a mentality of courage. And today I want to talk about moving from dishonor to honor. From dishonor to honor. Every single one of us have grown up in a culture that actually feeds on dishonor. And I want to talk about how God moves that along and how to partner with him in that. Now, before I get started, though, what I want to do is I want to give you an opportunity to think about honor from a couple of different angles. So this week I was reflecting on something I call the honor pyramid. And I kind of created this hierarchy of honor that begins with this, like the low-hanging fruit, actually, the easy stuff, and it gets more difficult as we begin. So you and I we're all conscious of honoring people for achievements, right? So the runner that comes in first or second or third, we give them a trophy. Well, maybe in our culture, we're starting to give trophies to everybody. But you know what I'm talking about. We honor people that have achieved a certain thing. We honor people who reach milestones. We honor people who get promotions. We honor people who are successful. We honor people who have reached a certain milestone in their life, like buying a home. We congratulate people. We honor people for their achievements. And this happens both in our earthly culture. It also happens in heavenly culture. Now, in heaven's culture, we don't honor people for getting rich. We don't honor people for getting ahead. What we honor people for is victories that they've battles they've fought, right? We honor people for the legacies they leave. We honor people for faithfulness. We honor people for, sticking with a problem and persevering. These are the kind of things we honor people for. So that's one level of honor. And you might think, well, in the kingdom, we don't honor people for achievement. Actually, we do. And when you think of Jesus, what are we honoring him for most of all? What he achieved. So achievements actually are things we honor in the kingdom, but it's different. We honor different things. So the second piece, which goes a little deeper, and this doesn't actually happen all that much in our culture, because we love to assault people's character and their reputations. But we honor people for their character. So throughout Scripture, people are honored for their wisdom. They're honored for their loyalty. We honor people for their humility or their creativity. We honor them for things that come out of them as an expression of their character, right? Beneath this, and this is one that I think is under fire in our culture in a big way, is honoring people for the roles that they fill or our relationship to them. So we're supposed to honor our parents. We're supposed to honor the kings or the people in authority. We honor leaders, but we also honor those who are maybe our friends. So we honor our friendships. We honor our marriage. We honor our spouse. We honor people for the relationships and the roles that they fill. All right? And then at the very base of the pyramid, and this is the one I think that is crazy important in our culture right now, is that we honor people for their inherent value before they've done anything, before they've developed character, whether or not they're angry, bitter people, or whether they're generous, kind people. They're inherently valuable because God has created them in His image. Right? Before they have a relationship with us, before they fill a role or give us some benefit, we honor them. And I want to say this is exactly at the core of the issue in the abortion debate right now. This is it. So, did you know, in most circles, the abortion debate has moved far beyond, is this a clump of cells or is this a person? Most people are now willing to concede, and even people who are pushing the agenda they're willing to concede, no, that's a person. We know that's a person. But what they say is there's no inherent value in that person until I can have a relationship with them, until they contribute, until they have a quality of life. And so what we're really wrestling with here is, do people have inherent value? Okay? Now, all of us both give and receive honor in our day-to-day lives. So here's the first thing I would like you to do, and make sure you're kind of sitting next to someone. Find 2 or 3 people, and I want you to reflect on this pyramid for just a few minutes. I want you to ask yourself, and maybe discuss really quickly with each other, which kind of honor is your favorite to receive in this pyramid? Like when you're honored, maybe it's like, oh, I love it when I accomplish something and someone notices it, and I'm honored for that. Or maybe it's something else. And there's no right or wrong answer. There's no better answer. Okay, which is your favorite kind to receive, and which kind makes you feel the most uncomfortable to receive? All right, so turn around and just take a few minutes and talk to each other about this. Which kind of honor is your favorite? Which is your least favorite to receive? And go. As you talk this through, you might realize, I don't think I'm ever valued for that one or this one. What would that even be like, right? Pretty interesting. Regardless of which is your favorite and which is your least favorite, I want to suggest that you and I fall into one of 2 categories when it comes to giving and receiving honor. One category is I seek it. The other one is it gives me hives. Okay, so some of us are willing to admit, no, that feels pretty good when people compliment me for what I do, or like, you know what, it feels really good for people to notice my integrity, and when people honor me for that, that feels pretty good, and we're actually willing to admit that there are times when I actually kind of go after that. Like I'm trying to get honor that I don't feel that I have, and I get upset when I don't receive the honor that I feel like I should be receiving. And then some of us are like, when someone gives me a compliment, I just go, ugh. I want to disappear. Like Shauna will do this. Like she'll just be like, you give someone her a compliment, she'll be like, oh, okay, moving on. She'll actually say that. Like, let's just move on. But either way, because I'm the opposite, I'm like, no, I feel kind of good. You know, thank you. You know, was just like, oh, stop, but don't, right? Like that kind of, that I'm willing to say, but whether we are the type that would seek honor or whether we're the type that it gives us hives, I think all of us in this room have an honor problem. And we actually have the same problem, Shauna and I. Here's the problem. I sometimes feel like I don't have enough honor, and so I try to go get more honor. She, on the other hand, has moments where she doesn't feel like she's worthy to receive that much attention and honor. Either way, we have an honor issue. We have an honor problem that God can actually address, and I believe wants to address today. So I'm really excited about what we're going to talk about. Now, the reason why honor is so important is because of what it is and what it does. We don't often think of it this way. In fact, sometimes we don't think of honor as being a positive thing. Because we're told that, well, we're supposed to honor God and we're supposed to just debase ourselves and humble ourselves. And so we don't know what to do with honor, but we don't realize, as Danny Silk says, he's a pastor at Bethel Church. He says, life flows through honor. Now, I'm going to show you how this works today. Honoring people, he says, positions us to give them what they deserve, whether it's something they've achieved or character that they embody or just their inherent value that we need to acknowledge. But it positions us to give them what they deserve and to receive the gift of who they are in our lives. If you think about how this works, if you dishonor somebody and they feel dishonored, you have cut off the flow of life between you. This is how it works. This happens just on a social level. It happens on a spiritual level. And this is why, again, the Bible talks about starting with God first. We honor God above all else. We honor Him first. And here's one of the reasons why. The Bible says, in the beginning, God. Right? And basically the story of the Bible is, in the beginning God, and things were going swimmingly, and then people stood up and said, actually, about that, I think it's actually about me. Okay? So we're going to go past the about me part. We're going to go right back to the in the beginning God, because, and I think you understand this, even if you're not a church person, if you picture what heaven might be like, my guess is you're thinking about worship. And then the reason we're worshiping God in heaven is not because there's a rule that everybody ought to worship in heaven. It's because God is so beautifully manifest in all of His glory that that's all we can do is worship. I mean, oh my goodness, we're so flabbergasted with who He is that we just bow down and worship God. So this is how it looks in heaven. The Apostle John had a vision in heaven. He was caught up into the third heaven, into the presence of God, and he saw this. He says, I looked, and I heard the voice of many angels, numbering thousands upon thousands, 10,000 times 10,000. Do the math, 10,000 times 10,000? Million? Yeah, so we're talking about, or 10 million, or 20 million, or 100 million. He can't count. He's like, I don't know, just make some exponential kind of expression of this. He says, they encircled the throne, and the living creatures and the elders. So there's other things in heaven, cherubim, seraphim, angels. There's elders, we don't know exactly who those are, but in a loud voice, they were saying, worthy it is the Lamb. That would be Jesus, the sacrificial Lamb. That's what He did on the cross. He died on the cross, who was slain to receive power and wealth and wisdom and strength and honor and glory and praise. And that is not an exhaustive list, and on and on and on. This is how it begins. Now, I don't know if you've ever thought of this. This is obvious when you look at a passage like this. You realize the focal point of heaven is God Himself. Okay? The most incredible thing about heaven is not that the streets are paved with gold. It's not that there's no pain or suffering. It's that we get to be with Jesus. Jesus is the centerpiece of heaven. However, heaven is not just a place where God is honored. Heaven is a place where God honors us. I don't know if you've ever thought of that. Why would He provide, and we'll read about this later, why would He provide thrones for us? Why would He give us crowns? Why would He pave the streets with gold? Why would He paint rainbows everywhere of glory and awesomeness? Heaven is also a place where God honors. How many of you, when you're at a corporate retreat, you don't know where you're going, and maybe you've done this before, you show up somewhere and you realize, oh my goodness, this is a posh place. And you're walking around going, look, it's silk, and there's all like in you're like Instagramming your hotel room because you feel so honored. Well, that's what's going to happen in heaven. It's all about God, but God has no trouble. This is what I want you to hear. God has no trouble honoring us. He just doesn't want us to take that honor for ourselves. This is the key. Look, sometimes people have this idea that to honor God, we've got to so debase ourselves that we're nothing and we're just worms in his presence, and as though if I look good, it's going to somehow take away from God. You don't look that good. I'm sorry to tell you, but you are not all that awesome. Like, you can shine to your heart's content, and God's not some like insecure bridezilla that doesn't want his bridesmaids looking prettier than he does on his wedding day. You know, have you heard these stories where the bride's like, you can't wear that. You look prettier than me. You got to dress the girls down so that the bride looks more awesome than the rest of the... This happens. This is a real thing. Okay? God is not like that. He is not insecure. He knows that if we shine and we are resplendent with his glory, it is in no way going to take away from him. In fact, it's going to point to him. So we somehow have to grab hold of this. Now, as we look at this scene in heaven, though, it's very natural for us to consider the greatness and glory of this God who is beyond compare, and to ask what the psalmist asked, what is mankind that you are mindful of them, human beings that you even care for them, right? Like, so we see the enormity of this God that we serve. It's so normal to go, why do you even pay attention to us? Why do you even care? And it's not that we're so awesome, it's that he's so awesome. That's why he cares, right? But by doing that, he's ascribing value to us. He's honoring us by caring for us. This is beautiful. So this is what the next verse says in this psalm. You, God, have made them, who? Humanity, a little lower than the angels, and crowned them with glory and honor. You, not just because you're a believer in Jesus or whether or not you're a believer in Jesus, not because you have a noble heart and you've developed character, not because of the achievements that you've racked up in your life, but just because you're you, just the way God created you. You have been crowned with glory and honor. But I've got bad news, because that idiot in your life is too. That person that makes life miserable for you, or even that drunk in the gutter as you drive downtown who's forgotten all of his woes in his drunken stupor, that soul there is crowned with glory and honor. That the crown might be bent, it might be dinged up, it might be dirty, it might be covered by layers of shame and guilt and bad decisions, but it is there. It is there inherently. Which means there is not a person in your life, there is not a person that you meet that is not deserving of your honor. And neither are you. You are deserving of honor. Not because of anything you've done, but because of how you're made and who made you. You are crowned with glory and honor. Jesus goes a step further. Beyond our created value, he lays aside this culture of glory and honor, where all of creation is centered around his throne, saying, praise you, you're worthy, you're worthy, you're worthy, the Lamb that was slain. He steps out of that environment into an environment where we don't even recognize him. He's willing to humble himself, and then he's willing to debase himself by getting under the lowest of the low. So he gets underneath the lepers and the blind and the lame and the outcasts. He gets underneath them so he can lift them up. He goes lower than any of us will ever go, going to the point where he's crucified for the sins of the people who deserve to be punished for them. He gets underneath all of it so that he can lift all of it up with his grace and his glory. And by dying in your place, listen, by dying in your place, your value has been forever set by the price of the one who paid his own life to get you back. You can never say ever that you are worthless. You can never say that you're not worthy of God's love because God has qualified you through Jesus. You can never, ever say you're not enough because God thought you're willing to send his son to die in your place. That is your value. That's who you are It's not the cross, as someone says, not just a revelation of our sin, because our sin was what made the cross necessary. But by Jesus willing to die on that cross, he actually set our worth and our value so that when the person in your life calls you out and calls you down and ridicules you and mocks you, and you start to feel less of a person, you got to go, no, Jesus has set my value. You don't set my value. He does. And you could never, why would I let that person diminish me when the King of Kings has exalted me? This is huge. And then, again, he seats us with him in heaven, in the heavenly places. He gives us thrones to sit on and paves the streets with gold. As if that weren't enough. Calls us his sons and daughters as we put our faith in him. Oh, this is good. Now, something's happening here. Even as we're sitting here, you're wrestling with concepts. You're wrestling with the tension in your soul, going, but I'm not, like, I'm such a mess, and I can't put my life together, and I fail God so often, and so you're left with this weakness in face of this greatness, and you're doing exactly what you should be doing, except that God has to move in a certain direction. James, the brother of Jesus, says, humble yourselves in the presence of the Lord. Humble yourselves in the presence of the Lord, and he will exalt you. Did you know that two things can be simultaneously true? That you can walk in humility before God and still walk in the exalted status he gives you? Do you see it here? It's not that once God exalts you, you don't have to be humble again. No. You stay humble. But somehow inside you are exalted to the point where you can't be diminished. Like you're humbling yourself is your choice. It's not something that happens to you. You choose it. You choose to walk in humility because you know compared to God, you are so very small. But compared to the world that you face and the problems you face, you are huge because God has He put himself inside of you. So here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to take a minute and walk you through an exercise that is theoretical and absolutely real. I want you to walk with me. I want you to close your eyes. Close your eyes now. And whether you are a believer in Jesus or not, I want you to walk through the exercise. If you're not a believer in Jesus, this could be yours. Okay? If you are, this is yours. Own it. Let him do this. So what we're going to do, close your eyes, is we're going to humble ourselves in the presence of the Lord and let him exalt us. We're going to do what the scriptures say. So I want you to picture yourself in those courts of heaven, just minuscule and small, in the presence of this perfect and glorious King that's more magnificent and more astounding, more terrifying in a sense than you could have ever dreamt possible, encircled by 10,000 angels. The praise of this glorious God is beyond what you could have comprehended. You've experienced nothing like it on this earth. And in the presence of this God, you feel so very small. You feel so insignificant. You feel unworthy to even be there. You look at these glorious, shining beings around you, and you look at yourself in tattered rags, and it's like the inside of your heart is on the outside. It's being worn like clothing, and you're filled with loathing in a sense because you see it there. There's your pride, there's your temper. It's like everyone can see it. It's like you're exposed by it. But then the most incredible thing happens as you drop to your knees and join in this throng. You humble yourself as is the only proper response. You bow down, you actually prostrate yourself on the floor of this great room full of all of these beings worshiping God, and you're weeping, you're saying, I am not worthy, I'm not worthy, I'm not worthy, and suddenly you realize the music has stopped. And the angels have stopped singing. In the awkwardness, you raise your head, and you realize all of heaven is focused on you. You realize that the one sitting on the throne, the God who should have all the attention, has actually got his attention on you. His gaze is on you. And he lifts you up. He comes underneath you like a flood of glory and lifts you to your feet. You feel these tattered clothes dissolving and being replaced by beautiful robes of righteousness that empower you. And suddenly you realize those robes aren't just on the outside, they're on the inside, just like your sin was on the inside and then it was on the outside. And suddenly you're filled with joy and you rise up. It's like this breath is filling your lungs and you're now radiant like the rest of the throng. Your chin rises to meet the gaze of this one who has dignified you. And he says, I paid the price for you. That is what you're worth. Never let anyone ever tell you otherwise. And the life of heaven is flowing through you. Now, in this moment, do you actually feel prideful, or do you feel even more humbled? Do you feel even more humbled? So you worship God and you exalt him even more profoundly than before. You see? You can open your eyes. The scripture we talked about said, humble yourselves in the presence of the Lord and he will exalt you. I want you to grab something today. It's so important. If you've grown up in church, you've spent your whole life rightly focusing on the first part of the verse. It's where it starts. If you don't get the first part, you start to walk in pride. Humble yourselves. But I want to tell you, just as it's critically important that we humble ourselves in the presence of the Lord, it is critically important that we let him exalt us. Because if we don't let him imbue us with the honor and dignity he wants to give us, we will spend the rest of our lives trying to get it from other people and situations. But when you finally realize, you've set me on fire, I'm full of glory and honor, not because I've earned it, but because you've given it to me, and somehow now you've dignified me. If we don't let him do that, again, we will spend the rest of our lives trying to seek honor from places that can't actually give it. He wants to set you free. This it doesn't mean you leave humility behind. In fact, the moment you leave humility behind, the honor sort of evaporates, right? It's somehow true. These things happen at the same time. I'm ultimately humble, but somehow I'm supremely exalted at the same time, and I'm completed and I'm confident, and that frees me. See, because here's what happens. When you let God honor you, not seeking it yourself, not trying to manipulate others to give it to you. When you let God honor you after you've humbled yourself before him, you know what happens? He dignifies you. He creates a dignity inside you. He doesn't just paint you with glory. He infuses you with glory so that it's who you are. You become a dignitary who's been dignified by the King of Kings. You become an emissary for this honor in a world that is revolving around dishonor. So now I have been ultimately honored. I am completely filled with honor. You can't take it from me because you didn't give it to me. So now I'm free to help other people come into this same relationship with this God who walks with us, who's not threatened by me being all I'm called to be. In fact, he is most glorified when I am everything I'm called to be. Is that good? Is this making sense? Is this connecting with you? Is it creating a hunger in that? As I'm speaking, go, yes, God, I want that, God. Yes, God, open that up in me. Show me, convince me. Because some of us are still going, but I'm a worm, or I'm not worthy. That is a lie from the pit of hell. Again, let's go back. Humble yourself in the presence of the Lord so that he can exalt you, complete you. There's a gentleman named Horst Schultz. He was, I think, one of the co-founders and then longtime CEO of Ritz-Carlton, the hotel chain. This like super dignified hotel chain. Like this is the place where you stay when you don't know where else to put your money. Like that's the kind of hotel that he runs. And he's created a culture in this hotel. It's amazing. I listened to several podcasts by this guy, and he talks about how whether you are the branch manager or you're the person doing the wash, like from top to bottom in his organization, he tells them, we are ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. Do you see what he's doing with that statement? He's not saying, you remember that those people we're serving are better than you because they're rich and you're not. He's saying, no, he's dignifying them. He's going, you are ladies and gentlemen. And that frees you to serve ladies and gentlemen. You see? When God honors you, he makes you honorable. And then you start to act as a person who carries honor instead of a person trying to go and get honor all the time. This is why John Bevere says honor is at the core of how God's kingdom operates. When you choose dishonor, you close yourself off to what God was otherwise going to do in your life. The choice is ultimately yours. Honor is at the core of what the kingdom's all about. This God who's not threatened by us at all. Beautiful. So when we're talking about honor, we have to do something else. We have to talk about dishonor a little bit. What does dishonor look like? Because I suggest to you, we live in a culture of dishonor. Dishonor looks like not giving our best. It looks like making excuses instead of taking responsibility. Dishonor looks like not keeping your promises, taking instead of asking, showing up late, not apologizing, lying to cover our own butts. Dishonor looks like ignoring or ghosting someone, not paying attention to what matters to people. Dishonor looks like interrupting while people are talking, taking people for granted, not getting back to them, relishing someone else's failure, hoping they get what's coming to them because they deserve it. Not being thankful for what people do. Not telling people you're thankful. This is what dishonor looks like. Not giving credit where credit is due. Belittling people, eye-rolling, one-upping, embarrassing someone on purpose, name-calling, using intimidation to get our way, not saying hard things because we care more about our discomfort than about our relationship with someone. Dishonor looks like gossip, it looks like slander, it looks like undermining, sitting in judgment, accusation, condemnation, and hate, refusing to forgive. In fact, refusing to forgive is holding contempt, our contempt of someone, over someone to punish them for the things they've done to us. At its core, unforgiveness is dishonor. What does honoring look like? Flip the script. Flip the script. So here's my question, because you got to get creative on that one. See, honor looks like love. It looks like treasuring. And it looks like not just keeping it in here, but making sure that it comes out there, like into the real world. So this is the prophetic, creative calling of every believer in Jesus. It's to figure out how to manifest the treasuring love of God by honoring people, whether or not they deserve it. Remember, we already established we don't. So here's the question. Don't skip this one. Who have you been dishonoring and how? My guess is as I was reading that list, you were seeing people in your mind. Either the people who have dishonored you or the ones you have dishonored. And you're going, I totally did that. Now, what you're feeling right now from the Holy Spirit would never be shame. Do you know that psalm? Those who look to him are radiant. Their faces are never covered in shame, the psalmist says. Why? Because God doesn't dishonor us. So even as we come to him with our sin, he actually removes our shame so that we can take responsibility without blame. Beautiful. So who have you been dishonoring and how? Name some people, okay? Now, here's the second question. Why have you felt justified to treat them that way? Well, that's just because he's an idiot. Well, this is just a pattern in their life. Well, she just always does that. Well, she doesn't deserve it. Well, just come up with your reasons. Just do it. Make a list. Why have you been justified to treat them with dishonor? If you're a follower of Jesus, the next question becomes, does your reason overrule the gospel? Does it invalidate the supreme honor of the one who allowed himself to be humiliated beyond belief, laying aside his heavenly glory, but even on that cross, allowing himself to be stripped naked, humiliated, and then put up on a cross, tortured as a criminal, unjustly accused, dishonored, disfigured beyond what we can comprehend? Does your reason, your excuse, your validation for dishonoring someone, do you really think it's more powerful than that? If it doesn't, we've got some repenting to do. Ladies and gentlemen, God's conviction never comes as condemnation, but it's coming to set us free so that we can live as ladies and gentlemen, so that we can more clearly manifest our sonship and our that is so, because when I find things that I'm dishonoring people, that is so unlike the calling I have been given. Oh my goodness, guys, this stupid message has been in development for weeks in my life. I've had like 2 or 3 conversations with my son Joel because I realized I've been dishonoring him. Like usually when we're having a conflict, and so I've actually had to come back. Oh, I did that too. Okay, so I interrupted him, and I come down on him, and I raised my voice. I just didn't let him finish what he was thinking or saying, I was dishonoring him. Now, I could go, okay, but he was being a butthead, but no, that's not the issue. Nothing gives me permission to dishonor someone. Because I choose love. Period. Doing a lot of repenting with Joel last couple of weeks. Now, last question. But I need to go on a short rant first. I just feel it. I mentioned that we are living in a culture of dishonor. I would even go beyond that to say we're living in a culture of contempt. What we have is we've got these extremes, and I don't know where you sit, and it's okay. On the left, culturally, politically, socially, the left, these are people who are trying to honor the marginalized and those that are at least being perceived as having been disenfranchised or hurt by groups in power. They're trying to honor the marginalized. Whether you agree about how they're going about it or not is secondary to the fact this is what they're trying to do. On the right, we've got a group of people that are trying to honor traditional values. The problem is that both sides feel justified to demonize the other side. So while I'm trying to honor the marginalized, I call you a Nazi. And while I'm so sanctimoniously on my high horse, defending cultural and normal and traditional values, I then call you evil and morally debase. So I find ways of just, we haven't even solved our contempt problem, our dishonor problem. What we do is we just take this target that's been on someone's back, we move it to somebody else's back. And then we crucify the other group. So we don't know how to deal with the honor problem. Folks, the only way to deal with the honor problem is through the gospel of Jesus. It's the work of Jesus who dignifies us. This is the only way. If we don't fix this problem, and I really believe we have empowered a spirit of contempt in our culture. Just now, in light of what I've been talking about today, run through your social feed and tell me I'm wrong. I don't mean even just your own post. I just mean the world we live in, the environment we're living in. Tell me we're not living in a culture of contempt. Tell me that the time has never been riper for sons and daughters of God to stand up and refuse to dishonor, to choose honor, to be beacons of, I tell you what, we will stand out. People may not agree with your stand on this and that and the other thing, but if you are a person of honor who chooses to honor, you will stand out. You will shine in a dark world like nothing else will in this culture. Because if we don't solve this problem in my own heart, starting right here, what's going to happen, and we can see it already, is whatever group is in power will use social and political pressure to try to shame and weaponize and destroy the other side, somehow fix the honor by purging it of. I don't even understand how this is supposed to work. Jesus is the only way out. We have a prophetic calling in this hour that nobody else can manufacture. If you don't have Jesus honoring you on the inside, you cannot do this. It's impossible. So let's go do the impossible. So here's the question. Who in your life needs, Jeremy, here's your word, an infusion? I didn't plan this. He was praying for me today. He said, I feel like the word infusion is important. There it is. Who in your life needs an infusion of honor to rise more fully into their nobility? How can you be part of that infusion this week? I close with one beautiful quote. As we go out into this world, rule with the heart of a servant and serve with the heart of a king.